My mother-in-law spent 3 years telling the whole town I was neglectful and unstable so she could convince my husband to move us into her guest house. I found the hidden baby monitor she used to record our private fights, and now the whole town knows the truth. The air in Oak Creek always smells like wood smoke and judgment. When I moved here 3 years ago to marry Mark, I thought I was moving into a Hallmark movie. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so I can work from anywhere. And the idea of a wraparound porch and a tight-knit community sounded like a dream after 10 years in the city. But in Oak Creek, community is just another word for surveillance. And the chief of police in this town isn't the guy in the uniform. It's my mother-in-law, Evelyn. Evelyn is the woman who organizes the church bake sales, chairs the historical society, and somehow knows exactly whose marriage is on the rocks before the couple even does. She welcomed me with a hug that felt like a trap and a casserole that tasted like obligation. "You're just so modern, Clara," she'd tell me, her eyes scanning my outfit for a flaw. "It's a big adjustment for a girl like you. Don't worry, I'll help you find your footing." For 3 years, that help has looked a lot like sabotage. It started small. She'd tell the neighbors I was struggling with the isolation of the town, leading to pitying looks at the grocery store. She'd mention to Mark's friends that I was fragile and prone to outbursts, so they'd walk on eggshells around me. But the real campaign started 6 months ago, when Evelyn began pushing for us to move into her guest cottage. It's a beautiful little house on the back of her 5-acre property. Mark, who is a high school football coach and a man who genuinely believes his mother is a saint, thought it was a generous offer. "Think of the money we'll save for a down payment on a real farm, Clara," Mark said, his eyes full of hope. "Mom just wants us close. She's getting older." I didn't want to go. I felt the walls closing in. But Evelyn was relentless. She started calling Mark at work, crying about heart palpitations, and how she felt vulnerable living alone. She'd drop off meals 3 times a week, sighing about how thin and pale I looked, hinting to Mark that I wasn't taking care of myself or him. Finally, I buckled. We moved in 2 months ago. And that's when the glitch started. It began with a gift. To celebrate our first week in the cottage, Evelyn brought over a beautiful antique ceramic vase. It was a heavy, hand-painted piece with intricate floral patterns. "It belonged to my grandmother," she said, placing it on the high shelf in our bedroom right across from the bed. "It's meant to bring peace to a home. Just leave it there, dear. It catches the morning light perfectly." I thanked her, feeling guilty for my constant suspicion. Maybe she was just a lonely woman trying to bond. But a week later, I noticed something strange. Mark started acting different. He'd come home from practice and look at me with a mix of pity and frustration. "Clara, Mom said you didn't leave the house today," he said one Tuesday, setting his whistle on the counter. "She said she knocked for 10 minutes and you didn't answer. Are you feeling okay? Maybe we should look into that therapist she mentioned." "Mark, I was on a Zoom call with a client in New York for 3 hours. I had my headphones on," I replied, my voice rising. "Why is she even coming over here unannounced?" "She was just bringing over a quiche." "Why are you getting so defensive?" That was the first real fight we had in the cottage. It was loud, it was messy, and I ended up crying in the bathroom. The next morning, Evelyn was at the door with coffee and a sympathetic hand on my arm. "I heard the shouting last night, dear." "It's okay. Hormones can be such a struggle." "I told Mark he needs to be more patient with your condition." "My condition?" "Evelyn, I don't have a condition." She just smiled, that thin, tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes, and patted my hand. "Of course not, dear. Let's just keep that between us." That afternoon, while I was dusting the bedroom, I accidentally bumped the shelf. The antique vase shifted, and for a split second, the sun hit it just right. I saw a glint, a tiny circular reflection near the center of a painted rose. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled a chair over, stepped up, and tilted the vase. There, hidden behind a microscopic hole in the ceramic, was a high-definition lens. It wasn't just a camera. It was a smart hub device, the kind that records audio and uploads directly to a cloud server. I sat on the edge of the bed, the vase in my lap, feeling a cold, oily slick of violation wash over me. She had been watching us. She had been listening to our fights. She had probably been triggering our fights just to record the aftermath. I looked at the lens. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to run across the lawn and scream until my lungs gave out. But then I remembered Mark's face, the way he looked at me like I was fragile. If I confronted her now, she'd just turn it around. She'd say I was being paranoid and delusional. She'd say I broke a family heirloom in a fit of rage. Mark wouldn't believe me. He'd believe the saint with the casserole. I carefully placed the vase back on the shelf. I adjusted it so it was at the exact same angle. Then I went to my office and pulled out my laptop. Evelyn thought she was the only one who knew how to use technology. She assumed that because I was a modern girl who liked art, I didn't understand the mechanics of a network. But as a graphic designer, I spend my life in the digital world. I logged into our router's admin settings. I looked at the connected devices. There it was, Nursery Cam 01. She hadn't even bothered to rename the default factory setting. She was using a baby monitor app. I didn't block the device. Instead, I did something much better. I mirrored the connection. Now, every time that camera recorded a clip and sent it to Evelyn's phone, it sent a copy to a hidden folder on my encrypted drive. I spent the next 3 hours watching the highlights of the last 2 weeks. I saw myself crying. I saw Mark looking frustrated. But then I found the clips I wasn't supposed to see. I saw Evelyn entering the cottage while we were both out. I watched her move through our rooms like a ghost. I watched her take a bottle of my prescription iron supplements from the bathroom cabinet and hide them in the back of the pantry. I watched her take a stack of mail, bills I'd been looking for, and tuck them into her handbag. And then I saw the most damning clip of all. It was filmed yesterday. Evelyn was in our kitchen talking to someone on her cell phone. "He's almost there, Joyce," Evelyn said into the phone, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I've got enough footage of her episodes to satisfy the board. By the time the Town Founders Brunch rolls around, Mark will have the power of attorney papers signed. We'll have her moved into that facility in the city. And Mark will be back in the main house where he belongs. It's for his own good. She's just not one of us." I closed the laptop. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Evelyn wanted a show for the Town Founders Brunch. She wanted to prove to everyone that I was the fragile outsider who couldn't handle the pressures of Oak Creek. Fine, I'd give her a show. But I wasn't going to be the lead actress in her tragedy. I was going to be the director of her downfall. The next morning, the sun hit that antique vase exactly like Evelyn said it would, like a spotlight on a crime scene. I stood in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, watching her through the window. She was in her garden, wearing a wide-brimmed straw hat and sensible gloves, pruning her prize-winning hydrangeas with the same clinical detachment she used to prune my life. Mark came downstairs, smelling like peppermint shaving cream and oblivious contentment. He kissed the top of my head, his eyes already drifting toward the sliding glass door. "Mom's already up," he murmured. "She mentioned something about a specialized nutritionist in the city. She thinks your episodes might just be a blood sugar thing, Clara. Isn't she great? She's doing all this research for you." I felt a cold, sharp spike of adrenaline. "An episode, Mark? Is that what we're calling it now?" I was upset because I couldn't find the electric bill and the late notice showed up in the mail, which is weird because I specifically remember putting the original on the counter. Mark sighed. That heavy, disappointed sound that Evelyn had spent months teaching him. "Clara, you probably just misplaced it. You've been so scattered lately. Mom found it in the recycling bin this morning when she was dropping off the breakfast quiche. Because she put it there, I thought, my grip tightening on my mug, right after she swiped it from the counter." "Right," I said, forcing my face into a neutral mask. "My mistake. I'm just so lucky to have her looking out for me." Mark beamed. "See? I knew you'd come around. I'm heading to early practice. I'll see you at 6. The second his SUV cleared the driveway, I went to my office. I had exactly 6 hours before Evelyn would inevitably check in on me. I didn't spend that time crying. I spent it in the digital trenches. I opened the nursery cam folder. The clips from last night were already there. I watched Evelyn sitting in her own living room, nursing a cup of tea, staring at her tablet with a look of predatory satisfaction. On her screen was the live feed of our bedroom. She was watching a recording of me sleeping. It was beyond concerned mother-in-law. This was a fetish of control. I scrolled further back, looking for the technical specifications of her setup. She was using a popular home security app called Guardian Angel. It was designed for parents to keep an eye on toddlers, but Evelyn had repurposed it for her own twisted version of elder care for a woman who wasn't even 30. The app had a feature called shared access. To make her plan work, she needed to show Mark the evidence of my instability. I checked the logs. She hadn't shared the account with him yet. She was waiting for the perfect climactic moment. The Town Founders Brunch. I leaned back, my mind racing. The brunch was the social event of the year in Oak Creek. It was held in Evelyn's massive backyard with white linens, catered mimosas, and the entire local elite in attendance. The mayor, the chief of police, the head of the historical society. It was where Evelyn was most powerful. If she presented her concerns there, under the guise of a tearful, heartbroken mother-in-law seeking community support, I would never be able to live in this town again. Mark would be pressured by everyone he respected to sign those papers. I needed to do more than just stop her. I needed to turn her own surveillance into a public confession. I spent the afternoon installing a mirror script on our home network. Every time the Vase camera uploaded a clip to Evelyn's cloud, my script would automatically duplicate it and push it to a private, password-protected site I was building. I titled the site the Oak Creek Archives. Then, I did something risky. I went into the main house while Evelyn was at her Ladies Who Lunch meeting. I used the spare key hidden under the stone frog, a key I wasn't supposed to know about. The house smelled of lavender and old money secrets. I went straight to her study. Her iPad was sitting on the mahogany desk, unlocked. Evelyn was arrogant. She didn't think anyone in this town was smart enough to bypass her simple 4-digit passcode. I opened the Guardian Angel app. I saw the thumbnails of our private lives. My stomach turned, but I moved quickly. I went to the settings and added a new viewer to the account. I used a burner email I'd created an hour ago. Now, I had full administrative access to her evidence. Then, I looked for the files she'd already edited. I found them in a hidden folder labeled C Project. My breath hitched. She had taken clips of me laughing at a joke on the phone and edited out the phone, making it look like I was talking to myself. She had taken a clip of me frantically looking for my car keys she had hidden, and slowed it down to make it look like I was having a panicked, manic episode. But then I found this special folder. It contained recordings from her own living room. It was Evelyn talking to herself while she curated her collection of my misery. "Almost there, Clara," she whispered in one video, her face illuminated by the blue light of the tablet. "Mark needs a wife who belongs here. Someone who understands legacy. Not a city girl who thinks she can change him." I heard the garage door opening. My heart leaped into my throat. I cleared the recent apps tray, set the iPad back exactly where it was, and slipped out the back door just as her Cadillac pulled into the driveway. I made it back to the cottage, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, watching the live feed of Evelyn entering her study. She picked up the iPad, checked the camera, and smiled. She thought she was watching me. She had no idea I was now the one holding the remote. For the next 3 days, I played the part. I let myself look scattered. I intentionally misplaced my shoes and let her find them in the garden. I let her see me staring blankly at a wall for 10 minutes. Knowing she was recording every second. I wanted her to feel confident. I wanted her to think her C project was ready for its grand debut. On Friday night, 2 days before the brunch, Mark came home with a thick envelope. He looked sick. "Clara, Mom had a talk with me today," he said, his voice trembling. "She showed me some things on her phone. Clips of you, honey. You're talking to people who aren't there. You're wandering around the yard at 3 a.m. I looked at him, my heart breaking for the man who was being systematically lied to by the person he trusted most. "Mark, did you actually watch those clips? Or did she just show you what she wanted you to see?" "I saw enough, Clara." "She's worried." "I'm worried." She said there's a place, a retreat, that can help. She said if I sign these papers for temporary guardianship, we can get you the help you need without it going on your public record. He laid the papers on the table. "The power of attorney and voluntary commitment forms. She wants you to sign these before the brunch on Sunday, doesn't she?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "She said it would be a weight off our shoulders so we can enjoy the party." Mark looked startled. "How did you know that?" "Because Evelyn loves a schedule, Mark." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I didn't sign the papers, though. I just tapped the pen against the table. "I'll tell you what, Mark. I won't sign these tonight. But I promise you, by the end of the brunch on Sunday, the truth will be out. If you still think I'm unstable after the guest of honor speaks, I'll sign whatever you want." "The guest of honor?" Mark frowned. "The mayor is the guest of honor." I smiled. The first real smile I'd had in weeks. "Oh, the mayor is just the opening act, Mark. The real show starts at noon." I went upstairs and looked at that antique vase. I leaned in close, knowing Evelyn was watching, knowing she was probably leaning into her tablet, eager to see my next breakdown. I whispered 2 words directly into the rose where the lens was hidden. "Checkmate, Evelyn." The Saturday before the town founders' brunch was the longest day of my life. The air in Oak Creek was thick with the scent of freshly mown grass and the looming sense of a trap being sprung. From the cottage window, I watched the rental trucks arrive. Men in white polos set up the massive marquee tent, the rows of folding chairs, and the podium where Evelyn planned to stand and effectively erase my life. Mark was a ghost that day. He wandered the house, picking up objects and putting them down, his eyes avoiding mine. He was mourning a woman who was still standing right in front of him. Every time he looked at me, he didn't see Clara. He saw the glitches Evelyn had curated on her iPad. "I'm going to help Mom with the seating charts," he muttered around noon, grabbing his keys. "Take your time, Mark," I said, my voice steady. "Make sure the mayor is front and center. He wouldn't want to miss a second of the presentation." Mark paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Presentation? It's just a brunch, Clara. Mom is giving a short speech about the town's founding families. That's it." "Of course," I smiled. "I'm sure it'll be unforgettable." As soon as his car vanished, I went to work. I wasn't just a modern girl anymore. I was a digital architect. I knew Evelyn's setup inside and out. She had hired a local AV company to set up a professional sound system and a large LED screen at the back of the tent for her historical slideshow. She'd told the technician she'd provide the USB drive herself. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the main house. I knew the AV tech, a 19-year-old named Toby who used to play for Mark's football team. He was currently struggling with a tangled HDMI cable near the podium. "Hey, Toby," I said, leaning against the tent pole. "Mark sent me over to check the compatibility for the slideshow. Evelyn is worried about the file format." Toby wiped sweat from his forehead. "Oh, hey, Mrs. J. Yeah, the missus is real particular about it. She said it has to be a seamless transition." "I bet. Tell you what, let me plug in and run a quick test on the wireless bridge. I've got the master files here." Toby, glad for the help from someone who actually knew what a wireless bridge was, stepped aside. Within 10 minutes, I had mapped the IP address of his media server. I didn't replace Evelyn's files. That would be too easy. She'd check them. Instead, I set a priority interrupt script. At exactly 12:15 p.m., the system would bypass the local USB and pull directly from the Oak Creek archives folder on my cloud server. I left Toby with a wave and walked back to the cottage. My stomach was in knots, but my mind was a cold, clear lake. That evening, Evelyn came over. She didn't knock. She just walked in, carrying a covered dish of her famous chicken divan. "I thought you looked a bit peaked today, Clara," she said, her eyes darting to the antique vase in the bedroom through the open door. "You haven't been wandering, have you? Mark said you were quite insistent about the brunch." "I just want to make sure I'm there to support the family, Evelyn," I said, taking the dish. "After all, I'm a Jenkins now, aren't I?" Evelyn's smile was like a razor blade. "For now, dear. For now." She lingered in the doorway, her gaze lingering on the table where the unsigned guardianship papers sat. Mark is a good man. He wants what's best for you. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Sign the papers tonight and we can tell everyone at the brunch that you're taking a health sabbatical in the city. It's much more dignified than a public breakdown. I think I'll wait for the morning light, I said. Everything looks clearer in the morning. Sunday arrived with a sky so blue it felt mocking. By 11 a.m., the backyard was a sea of pastel dresses and linen suits. The who's who of Oak Creek were all there, sipping mimosas and praising Evelyn's hydrangeas. I stood in the corner of the tent, wearing a sharp navy blue dress that felt like armor. Mark was at my side, his hand gripping my elbow so hard his knuckles were white. He looked like he was bracing for me to start screaming or talking to the bushes. Evelyn was in her element. She moved through the crowd like a queen mother, receiving tributes. I watched her lean in and whisper to the chief of police, gesturing toward me with a sad, mournful shake of her head. I saw the chief's face soften with pity. The trap was set. At noon, the mayor gave a brief, boring speech about tradition and roots. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She stepped up to the podium, her iPad in hand. She looked radiant, the picture of a concerned pillar of the community matriarch. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice amplified and echoing through the garden. "Today we celebrate our history. But as many of you know, history is also about the challenges we face as families. Sometimes those challenges come from outside our walls. Sometimes we bring people into our lives who struggle to fit our values." She looked directly at me. The crowd went silent. I felt Mark's grip tighten. "I've spent the last 6 months trying to help a member of my family who is deeply unwell," Evelyn continued, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I wanted to keep this private, but the safety of my son and the integrity of this town are at stake. I've prepared a short video to explain why we've had to make some very difficult decisions regarding Clara's care." She tapped her iPad. The large LED screen behind her flickered to life. The first clip appeared. It was the edited version of me in the bedroom, looking manic while searching for my keys. The crowd gasped. Mark looked at his shoes, his face burning red. Evelyn stood at the podium, a single fake tear rolling down her cheek. "As you can see, she is simply not herself." I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just looked at my watch. 12:15 p.m. The screen suddenly went black for a second. Then, a new title card appeared in a bold professional font. "The Oak Creek Archives. The full story." Evelyn froze. She tapped her iPad frantically, but the priority interrupt had locked her out. The screen cut to a new video. It wasn't me, it was Evelyn. It was the footage from 2 nights ago. The unedited clip of her entering the cottage while we were out. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the saint of Oak Creek moved through our kitchen, deliberately hiding my medication and swiping our bills. "Wait, what is this?" the mayor whispered. The video cut to the footage of Evelyn in her study, talking to Joyce on the phone. Her voice boomed through the high-end speakers, clear as a bell. "I've got enough footage of her episodes to satisfy the board. We'll have her moved into that facility. Mark will be back in the main house where he belongs. She's just not one of us." The garden went deathly silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Evelyn's face went from pale to a sickly mottled purple. She looked like she was choking. But I wasn't done. The final clip played. It was Evelyn, standing in front of the hidden camera in the vase, practicing her sad mother-in-law face in the mirror. She was literally rehearsing the tear she had just shed at the podium. "Does this look heartbroken enough?" she asked her reflection on the screen. "Yes. That will do perfectly." The video cut to black. I stepped forward, walking slowly toward the podium. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I looked up at Evelyn. She was clutching the podium so hard her nails were leaving marks in the wood. "I think we've seen enough of your history, Evelyn," I said, my voice echoing through the silence. "The only person who is unwell in this family is the one who thinks it's okay to spy on her children and plot their destruction over a casserole." I turned to Mark. He was staring at the screen, his jaw hanging open. He looked at the guardianship papers in his hand, the ones he had been so close to signing, and he tore them in half. The casserole conspiracy was over. And for Evelyn, the real nightmare was just beginning. The silence that followed the final clip was heavier than any sound Evelyn had ever made. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. 300 people, the literal foundation of Oak Creek, sat frozen with mimosas halfway to their lips, staring at the woman they had spent decades treating like a saint. Evelyn didn't move. She looked like a statue carved from salt. Her iPad was still clutched in her hands, the screen glowing a mocking blue against her pale skin. "Evelyn!" The mayor finally found his voice, though it sounded thin and cracked. What exactly are we looking at?" I didn't give her a chance to answer. I stepped onto the small wooden stage, the heels of my boots thumping with a deliberate, steady rhythm. I didn't look like a fragile girl from the city anymore. I looked like a woman who had spent 6 months being hunted and had finally turned around to face the wolf. "You're looking at the C project, Mayor," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the high-end speakers I'd hijacked. "That's what Evelyn called her plan to have me committed so she could get her son back under her roof. She didn't just spy on us. She manufactured evidence. She hid my mail to make me look irresponsible. She stole my supplements to make me look sick. And she put a high-definition camera in a family heirloom vase in our bedroom to record our private lives." A collective gasp rippled through the tent. In a town like Oak Creek, privacy is the only currency that matters more than money. The idea of Evelyn Jenkins, the woman who presided over their weddings and funerals, having a hidden lens in a bedroom was the ultimate taboo. I looked at Mark. He was standing at the edge of the grass, the the torn guardianship papers fluttering from his hand like confetti. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at his mother as if she were a stranger he'd just met in a dark alley. "Mark," Evelyn whispered, her voice finally breaking. "Mark, honey, it's not what it looks like. I was doing it for you." She's manipulative. She probably faked that video with those digital tools she uses. It was a pathetic, desperate play. But in a town where some people still thought the cloud was something that brought rain, it was a seed of doubt she hoped would grow. "Faked it, Evelyn?" I asked, pulling my phone from my pocket. "Toby, can you switch the feed to my phone's live display?" Toby, who looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die, nodded and hit a button on his console. The LED screen flickered and showed my phone's screen. I opened the Guardian Angel app. "This is the live feed from the vase in our bedroom right now," I said. The screen showed our unmade bed, the sun hitting the pillows, and the quiet stillness of the cottage. "And this," I said, tapping the screen to show the account settings, "is the administrator list. It shows Evelyn's email as the primary owner. It shows the login times. It shows every single time she accessed the camera while we were sleeping, while we were dressing, while we were living." I scrolled through the logs. The dates and times were indisputable. The chief of police stood up. He wasn't the pitying neighbor anymore. He was a man who had spent 20 years in law enforcement, and he knew a felony when he saw one. "Evelyn," he said, his voice dropping into a professional low rumble. "Installing a hidden recording device in a place where there is a reasonable expectation of privacy? That's a serious violation. We're talking about illegal surveillance and wiretapping." Evelyn finally broke. She didn't cry, she snarled. The mask of the grand matriarch shattered, revealing the jagged, ugly bitterness underneath. "I built this town!" she shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at the crowd. "I kept your secrets. I made sure this place stayed respectable. And you're going to listen to this outsider? This girl who doesn't know a hydrangea from a weed? She was taking him away from me. She was taking my son to a city where he'd be nothing." Mark finally moved. He walked toward the stage, his footsteps heavy on the grass. He didn't look at the crowd, and he didn't look at me. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked up at his mother. "You tried to have my wife committed, Mom," he said, his voice so quiet it was almost a ghost. "You tried to convince me she was losing her mind. I almost believed you. I almost signed those papers because I thought I was saving her. But you weren't trying to save anyone. You were just trying to own me. Mark, I love you," she cried, reaching out to him. "No," Mark said, stepping back from her touch as if it were poison. "You love the idea of me. You love the Jenkins legacy, but you don't know the first thing about love. Love doesn't need a hidden camera." He turned and looked at me. For the first time in months, I saw the man I had married. Not the confused, gaslit shadow Evelyn had turned him into, but the man who had promised to protect me. "Clara," he said, his eyes wet. "I'm so sorry." "Don't tell me," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "Tell the chief, because I'm not staying in that cottage another night." The brunch didn't end with a toast. It ended with the mayor asking everyone to leave quietly and respectfully. But we all knew that by sunset, the phone lines in Oak Creek would be burning. Evelyn Jenkins, the woman who knew everyone's secrets, was now the woman whose own secret was the biggest scandal in the town's history. As the crowd filtered out, their faces a mix of shock and morbid curiosity, the chief approached the podium. "Evelyn, I think you and I need to have a conversation at the station. We'll need to secure that device and your iPad as evidence." Evelyn sat down in the chair behind the podium, her expensive silk dress suddenly looking like a shroud. She looked at the empty garden, at the wilted mimosas and the scattered chairs. Her empire hadn't been conquered by a rival. It had been dismantled by the very technology she thought she could use to enslave me. I walked off the stage and met Mark at the bottom. He reached for my hand, hesitant, waiting for me to pull away. I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. There was too much damage for a single moment to fix. "Where are we going?" he asked. "I'm going to the city, Mark. I have an apartment booked for a month. My things are already packed in my car. I did it last night while you were sleeping." "Clara, please, I'll make this right. I'll make her pay." "She's already paying, Mark. Look at her," I said, gesturing to the broken woman sitting alone on the stage under the massive screen that still showed her own betrayal. "But this isn't about her anymore. It's about us. You had those papers in your hand. You were ready to sign away my freedom because your mother told you to." "I thought I was helping you." "That's the problem, Mark. You believed her over me. You listened to her curated evidence instead of the woman who sleeps next to you. You didn't trust me. And until you figure out why your mother's voice was louder than mine, there is no us." I walked toward my car, parked at the edge of the driveway. I didn't look back at the cottage, or the main house, or the woman who had tried to steal my life. I looked at the road leading out of Oak Creek. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw the chief of police leading Evelyn toward his patrol car. She wasn't in handcuffs, not yet, but the image was enough. The saint of Oak Creek was being escorted away in front of her own prize-winning hydrangeas. I drove past the town square, past the church where she ran the bake sales, and past the hardware store where she knew everyone's name. I didn't stop until I hit the highway. My phone buzzed on the seat next to me. It was a notification from the Guardian Angel app. "Device offline." I smiled, pulled the phone over, and deleted the app. The surgery was over. The cancer was out. And for the first time in 3 years, I could finally breathe the air without the scent of wood smoke and judgment. The hotel room in the city was sterile, quiet, and glorious. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't look at the smoke detector to see if it was blinking. I didn't check the back of the picture frames. I just sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the muffled roar of traffic 20 floors below. It was the sound of anonymity. And it was beautiful. But Oak Creek wasn't done with me. By Tuesday, the local news had picked up the story. Prominent community leader facing wiretapping charges. The headline didn't name Evelyn, but in a town of 3,000 people, they didn't have to. My inbox was a battlefield. There were messages from women I barely knew, apologizing for the cold shoulders at the grocery store. There were prayers from the church group that felt more like gossip-seeking missiles. And then there were the messages from Mark. Clara, she's had a breakdown, a real one this time. The lawyers say the evidence is irrefutable. She's facing felony surveillance charges. Please, just talk to me. I've moved all my things out of the cottage. I'm staying at a motel. I can't go back in that house. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Every time I thought of Mark, I didn't see the man who loved me. I saw the man holding a pen, ready to sign away my heartbeat because his mother told him I was fragile. On Wednesday, my phone rang. It wasn't Mark. It was the chief of police, Miller. Clara, I'm sorry to bother you in the city, but we've run into a bit of a situation during the forensic sweep of Evelyn's devices. We found something you need to see. It's not about the bedroom camera. What is it, Miller? I asked, my voice tight. It's about your father's estate and your move to Oak Creek. I was back in the station by Thursday afternoon. The air in the precinct felt different. The officers who used to tip their hats to Evelyn were now looking at the floor when I walked in. Miller led me into a small interview room and slid a tablet across the table. We found a series of emails between Evelyn and a law firm in the city from 4 years ago, Miller said, dated 6 months before you and Mark even met. I frowned, scrolling through the threads. My blood turned to ice. The emails weren't about me. They were about my father, a man who had owned a successful logistics company before he passed away. Evelyn had been tracking his estate. She knew about the trust fund he'd set up for his future grandchildren, a fund that was only accessible if his daughter married into a stable, established family with deep roots. She scouted me, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She didn't just scout you, Clara, Miller said, pointing to a specific attachment. She orchestrated the chance meeting at that charity gala in the city. She knew Mark was looking for someone, and she knew your father's legacy was worth millions. She didn't want you in that cottage to keep you close. She wanted you there so she could control the timeline of the inheritance. The guardianship papers weren't just about care. They included a clause that gave her control over your financial interests if you were deemed incapacitated. I leaned back, the walls of the room feeling like they were closing in. It wasn't just a mother-in-law who couldn't let go. It was a long con. My entire marriage, the move, the support, the casseroles. It was all a calculated investment for a woman who wanted to rebuild the fading Jenkins fortune with my father's blood and sweat. Does Mark know? I asked. We haven't shown him yet, Miller said. We wanted to talk to you first. This moves it from illegal surveillance into financial fraud and racketeering. I left the station and drove straight to the motel where Mark was staying. I found him sitting on a plastic chair outside his room, looking gray and diminished. When he saw my car, he stood up, a flicker of hope crossing his face. Clara, you came back? I didn't get out of the car. I rolled down the window and handed him the printed copies of the emails. Read these, Mark. Read them and tell me if you still think your mother loves you. I watched his eyes move across the pages. I watched the moment the light went out of his soul. He slumped back against the brick wall of the motel, the papers fluttering in his hands. She picked you out? He gasped. The gala. The accidental introduction at the bar. She planned it. She didn't want a daughter-in-law, Mark. She wanted a piggy bank, and she used you as the bait. Mark started to sob. Not the quiet, dignified cry of a man in mourning, but the jagged, ugly wail of a child who realized his entire existence was a lie told by his mother. I didn't know, Clara. I swear to God, I thought it was real. I know you didn't know, Mark, I said, my voice heavy with a pity that hurt more than anger. But that's the problem. You were so easy to use. You let her lead you by the nose because it was easier than standing up for the woman you claimed to love. You were the weapon she used to break me. What do I do? He asked, looking at me with desperate, hollow eyes. How do I fix this? You can't fix it, Mark. Some things are too broken for a second chance. You need to go to the station and give them a full statement. Tell them every concern she ever voiced, every pill she ever found, every late bill she discovered. You need to be the witness that puts her away, not for me, but for yourself. I put the car in gear. Clara, wait, where are you going? I'm going to see a lawyer, Mark, but not for guardianship, for a divorce. And then I'm going to change my name back to the one my father gave me. The one Evelyn tried to steal? I drove away, leaving him standing in the gravel of a cheap motel parking lot. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won a prize. I just felt clean. I headed back toward the city, but first I stopped at the Oak Creek Cemetery. I walked to my father's grave, a simple, elegant stone I hadn't visited nearly enough since the Jenkins cloud took over my life. I knelt down and pulled a few weeds from the base of the stone. She didn't get it, Dad, I whispered. She thought she could trap me in a ceramic vase, but she forgot that you raised me to be the one who draws the maps, not the one who follows them. I stood up, the wind from the valley blowing the scent of Oak Creek away from me. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like a survivor. The casserole conspiracy was no longer a secret. It was a matter of public record. And as I looked at the sunset over the hills, I knew that while Evelyn would spend her final years in a cell, I would spend mine in the sun. The courthouse in the neighboring county felt like a different world from the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. There were no hydrangeas here, only cold marble, metal detectors, and the heavy silence of a place where secrets go to die. I sat in the front row, my back straight, wearing a suit the color of a storm cloud. Evelyn entered the room through a side door, flanked by 2 lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She wasn't wearing a straw hat or gardening gloves. She was in a standard-issue navy jumpsuit, her hair uncharacteristically flat, her face stripped of the Saint of Oak Creek mask. For the first time, she looked her age. She looked small, but when her eyes found mine, that old spark of predatory malice flickered. She didn't look remorseful. She looked indignant, as if the universe had made a clerical error by putting her on that side of the wooden bar. The trial lasted 3 days. It wasn't just about a hidden camera anymore. The prosecution laid out the C project with devastating clarity. They showed the bank records, the scouted emails, and the forensic timeline of my episodes versus the times Evelyn had logged into the pharmacy records and my personal mail. Then came the moment everyone had been whispering about. Mark took the stand. He didn't look at his mother. He sat in the witness chair, his voice shaking but clear. He testified about the gaslighting, the concerns she had whispered in his ear every night, and the way she had systematically dismantled his trust in his own wife. "Did you believe your mother was acting out of love, Mr. Jenkins?" the prosecutor asked. Mark paused, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I did. I thought she was the only one who cared. But looking back, I realized she was just the only one who wanted to hold the leash." Evelyn let out a sharp, audible hiss from the defense table. "Ungrateful boy," she muttered, earning a sharp reprimand from the judge. But the final blow didn't come from Mark. It came from the Oak Creek archives. I had provided the court with the full, unedited library of footage Evelyn had recorded. The jury watched as she moved through my home like a common thief. They heard her cold, calculating voice as she discussed liquidating my father's trust once I was safely tucked away in a facility. When the verdict came down, it wasn't a surprise. Guilty on all counts: felony wiretapping, identity theft, and attempted financial fraud. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing. "Mrs. Jenkins, you spent decades cultivating a reputation as a pillar of your community, but pillars are meant to support, not to crush. You used your position, your family, and the sacred trust of a mother to launch a calculated strike against a woman who did nothing but try to love your son. You didn't want a family, you wanted a franchise." Evelyn was sentenced to 5 years in a state facility, followed by 10 years of strict probation. As they let her out in handcuffs, the casserole queen finally broke. She started screaming. Not at the judge, not at the jury, but at me. "You'll never belong there, Clara. They'll always know you're the one who destroyed a Jenkins. You're nothing without that name." I didn't say a word. I just watched the heavy steel doors swing shut behind her. The aftermath. Oak Creek changed after that. A week later, I returned to the cottage one last time to collect the rest of my things. The town felt different. The community was still there, but the air of surveillance had lifted. People didn't whisper when I walked past. They looked away, ashamed of how easily they had been led by Evelyn's gossip. Mark was waiting for me on the porch. He looked like he hadn't slept in a month. "I sold the main house," he said, handing me a check. "It's your half of the equity, plus the damages the lawyer agreed on. I'm moving to the coast. I got a job coaching at a small college. I need to start over, Clara, away from the shadow." "That's good, Mark," I said, taking the check. "I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. Can we ever talk? Someday?" I looked at him, the man I had once thought was my forever. I saw the kindness in his eyes, but I also saw the weakness that had nearly cost me my life. Trust isn't like a broken vase. You can't just glue it back together and pretend it holds water. "No, Mark, I think it's better if we don't. Every time I look at you, I remember the feeling of those guardianship papers in my hand. I need to look at someone and see safety. And I don't see that with you." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. I'm sorry, Clara, for everything." I drove away from Oak Creek for the last time. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The new map. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new studio in the city. It was a wide-open loft with huge windows and no hidden corners. My name, Clara Vance, was etched in gold on the glass door. My business was thriving. People didn't hire me because of a family legacy. They hired me because I was the best at what I did. I reached for my coffee mug, and my hand brushed against a small, plain ceramic bowl on my desk. It wasn't an antique. It wasn't a gift. I'd bought it at a local craft fair. It was just a bowl, meant to hold paper clips and nothing more. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert from Oak Creek. The Jenkins estate had been purchased by a nonprofit. They were turning it into a community center, a place for transparency, local art, and open dialogue. They were calling it the Clara Center. I smiled and closed the laptop. Evelyn thought she could trap me in her history. She thought she could use her tradition to erase my future. But she forgot one thing. Tradition is just a story we tell ourselves, and I was finally the one holding the pen. The casserole conspiracy was a tragedy, but the ending was mine. I wasn't the girl who got caught in a vase. I was the woman who broke it to find the light.